It's time for the Wrestling Observer Extra.
I said one more time for old time's sake.
With Dave Meltzer, right here on The Law, live audio wrestling.
And let's go. We're now smoking with the best.
Welcome back. Second hour of The Law Live Audio Wrestling, and is going to start a lot like the second hour did last week. Right. Dave's lined up on the phone here, but let me kick things off with another one of these
TNA update.
Really an Anthem Sports and Entertainment update. Now, I want to compare this to what we have in this city, where Rogers owns the Toronto Blue Jays, and there are still sports radio stations that do talk about the Toronto Blue Jays that are also owned by Rogers and talk about them in an unbiased manner. So let's just put that out there, because clearly Anthem Sports and Entertainment, parent company of the Fight Network, which is the parent company of us. But we're still going to talk about it.
And don't yell at us if we don't re-sign Bautista. Or
Yes, that's right. Okay, so Anthem Sports and Entertainment confirmed that it recently made a working capital loan to fund the operations of TNA Impact Wrestling. Fight Network is a licensee of TNA programming for broadcast in the U.S., Canada, and other international markets, and is also the exclusive licensee of TNA for streaming internet-delivered TV. Fight Network has also offered to provide TNA Impact Wrestling with funding to repay the loans made by Mr. Billy Corgan, as it is positioned to provide additional transitional assistance to the company. TNA is a strong property for the Fight Network, and as a licensee and global distribution partner, we have a keen interest in seeing the company not only survive, but continue to grow and thrive alongside our own growth. Now, that was said by Leonard Asper, the CEO of Anthem. We are hopeful that the company can soon get back to doing what it does best, which is to produce great wrestling content. So that's a statement from Anthem Sports, from Leonard, our boss. And along with that, though, also this week, in regards to TNA, there was another lawsuit filed from American Express Travel for $269,000, and then another lawsuit that was just reported on today by you, Dave Meltzer, filed for over $200,000 from Bank Direct Capital Finance. Dave, from what I'm seeing from all these lawsuits, it just seemed like TNA would borrow from one person and one creditor to pay to another and just move money around, but never get above the frost line.
That's it, and I'm sure there's stuff that we don't know about. I mean, I think the stuff that we do know about is probably, it's over $4 million. So that's the deal. So the deal, what's intriguing about what you just said is that when the Fight Network, Anthem Sports, did not like with Billy Corgan and Aerolux and Anthem Sports previously, when they put money in and got a percentage of the stock so they became owners, this was a loan. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason for this is because Billy Corgan had gotten an injunction last week where they could not sell any of the company. They couldn't sell the tape library. They couldn't sell anything because he was able to convince the judge, or his lawyers were able to convince the judge, that in his lawsuit they would probably prevail and he would probably win, and he was looking for control of the company and didn't want them making any changes or anything or doing anything without his approval. So in a sense, his argument was the company was completely insolvent, and because they would not be allowed to sell anything, I think there was the feeling that they couldn't do what they've done, which is go to some business partner and say, hey, in exchange for 10% of the company, give us some money and we can, stave off Billy. But so what happened was, instead of buying a percentage, this was called a loan, which Billy's injunction couldn't stop somebody from putting money in just from buying a piece of the company or buying the tape library. So that's why this wasn't a purchase of stock as much as a loan. And as far as they want to, TNA or Dixie wants to pay Billy to just go away and drop this suit because they don't want this suit out and they don't want, the bad publicity from the suit, and they want him gone at this point because he sued them. And as best I can tell as of right now, even though they've offered to pay him back all the money that he spent, he's not dropping the suit. That could change, but that was the last I've heard, and that's the position that we're in right now.
What is the thought process or the feeling with the talent that is working there in regards to Billy Corgan being pushed out at this point, or the intention of Billy Corgan being pushed out How does the talent feel about him?
You'll probably get different people with different ideas. I can only tell you that the talent that I do know was pro-Billy Corgan and anti-Dixie Carter, or at least had begotten that way in the last couple of weeks or something. They basically felt he was the only one who could save them, and obviously they're looking for the company to be saved, so they were behind him. But as far as where they are and everything now, I think that the best answer is probably just that they're confused and hopeful that they get their checks this week that they didn't get last week when they were supposed to on the 15th, and they were promised they would get it tomorrow, and hopefully they do get it tomorrow.
I just think the whole thing is unbelievable, especially in terms of Corgan's relationship with the company and how quick everything has just gone completely sour. Just a couple of months ago, everyone thought he was going to be kind of like the savior, get the company back going, get some new ideas in there, and now it seems to be even in worse shape than when he showed up.
Well, it is in worse shape, but they were playing this game, and this game's been going on. I mean, if you look at these lawsuits, it's been going on since probably early 2015, mid-2015. And they've been just, playing this game since then, and it was going to catch up to them. And Bound for Glory weekend essentially was the weekend it would, except Anthem Sports put up the money for Bound for Glory right before, what could have been, not necessarily the end of the company, but they would be putting all their contracts in jeopardy by not providing television for that they needed. So it could have been the end of the company, or certainly the end of their television contracts, which is all they have is those contracts, really.
So as it stands right now, Corgan is not accepting this money coming back. He's pursuing the lawsuit, and this is going to become public domain?
Yeah, Tuesday, I think.
That will be a very interesting day.
For sure.
Of course it's on a Tuesday.
Exactly, always.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Dave, let's flip over to the world of WWE. We were talking on the show about the prep for Survivor Series. Beyond the Goldberg stuff, which I think pretty much everyone agrees was a great segment, looking down the card, they've decided to do the traditional Survivor Series format, but you're going to have baby faces and heels on each of the teams.
Right.
And looking at that card, the WWE will be telling the same story of tension and infighting on all of the teams 3 times over on the card.
3 matches. In a singles match, a tag team, and a women's match. Yeah.
Yeah. This seems like a very poor formula for a pay-per-view.
Well, the idea of the pay-per-view is Raw versus SmackDown, and I think that I just feel that we're early because I don't think people buy that, buy a rivalry between the two. I mean, they pushed it. They always said, we're competing with them for ratings and everything, but, everyone knows SmackDown loses the ratings every week, and it's not like they're going to go out of business, even though Mick Foley goes, if we lose the ratings, we could go out of business. And it's like, are we really, how can we possibly believe this storyline? It's like they're trying to redo the Monday Night Wars, and
it's not working.
Everyone knew those were actually different companies.
Yeah, it seems very strange. Also, there was a tease, Dave, of maybe like Owens and Jericho being on part of the Raw team. And to me, I would think you would want Owens defending the title or something at Survivor Series. You wouldn't want him in a Survivor Series match.
Yeah, well, you'd think, and especially because you would got to think that it's going to be Owens, Rollins, and Jericho and 2 other guys.
Rusev Reigns.
Team. So, and I mean, the thing is that Owens and Jericho. The tension with Owens and Jericho is probably the most interesting thing right now on the show.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So at least it keeps that going. But you're right. It's like a Survivor Series, and you're not going to, if you don't have either, because I'm guessing Styles is going to be on the other team.
See, that is the same thing.
So you don't even have either championship. You're really relying the whole show on Raw versus SmackDown and the idea of, well, if that doesn't work drawing-wise, in theory, and it probably wouldn't, historically that wouldn't work, but you've got Brock Lesnar and Bill Goldberg, which in theory should be the biggest match they've had in a long time.
I had a lapsed fan come up to me today who had heard about Goldberg, and then he's like, Survivor Series, they're doing the old format again. It's Raw versus SmackDown, but what do they get if they win? And
I don't know. They probably will come up with something. I mean, I hope. Didn't they have like a cup or something? Remember when they had the Raw versus SmackDown? They had that cup and then about 3 weeks later they forgot the cup.
Right.
And they just dropped it.
Yeah.
Bragging rights. Remember?
Yeah.
And again, it's like, and those shows bombed. That's one of the things that is like this format has been done before. I mean, as recently as just a few years ago, and it bombed terribly. But again, they didn't have Brock Lesnar and Bill Goldberg on top.
Yeah, I don't doubt the pay-per-view will draw simply because of Goldberg and Brock, but the
it's
rest
gonna
of
be
the card, I feel it's going to be a very difficult situation for booking.
So I got a question for you guys, being from Toronto, because originally when we announced it, and I think we even talked about it, was the idea that Bill Goldberg and Brock Lesnar. Well, it's Toronto. Brock's Canadian, and Bill was, everyone remembers he ended Bret Hart's career, played a strong part in it. And Bill was going to get booed so much, but I watched that thing on Monday, and Bill came off so great.
Yep.
Like better than anyone on Raw's come across in God knows how long. So it's like, what do you think's going to happen in that match now?
It's going to be a tough one. I mean, I think it depends. It really depends, I think, on how they book the rest of it as well. To how fans react. But I agree with what you're saying. It's like that segment came off so well that I think it might heal some of the hate here in Toronto.
Yeah.
Dave, for Hell in a Cell, and we're kind of jumping over going to Survivor Series here, but Hell in a Cell is coming up next week. Do you believe that the women will go on in the main event spot, or was Foley jumping the gun?
Foley was jumping the gun. See, this is my theory on this. If the women are going to go on in the main event spot, they should have announced it 2 weeks ago and promoted the hell out of this historic night. And if they don't, I almost think they shouldn't, because you can only do this once. You can only make a big deal out of it once. And to me, women in the main event for the first time ever on a WWE pay-per-view is not something that should have a 6-day build. I think that's a waste of it. So everyone wants it, and everyone's going to be mad at me for saying that, but I believe that they should not do it now, only because they dropped the ball when they should have announced it. And if they had announced it 3 weeks ago, I think it would have been great. But now it's like, why? You can only do it once. Why waste it on such a late thing that just isn't going to mean anything? But if they don't announce it on Monday and then they do it on Sunday with no announcement at all, I think that's ungodly foolish.
On top of that, if you were going to do the main event, then why not wait for the title change for Sasha in her hometown for the main event?
Absolutely. That's the other thing is Charlotte never loses on pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. Do they want to break the streak? I mean, yeah, you could, and it is in Boston and everything. But if the finish is Charlotte winning in Boston, maybe that's another reason, if that's what it is, not to go last.
Do not go last.
But I don't perceive Rollins beating Owens either. So the only babyface win that I'm expecting is Roman Reigns and Rusev.
Well, there's your main event.
Of the three, that's the worst of the three to put on top.
Yeah, I'm joking.
Yeah,
Dave,
I know.
Before we go, Frenchy Martin passed away this week. I mean, I remember Frenchy Martin from, of course, his managerial days in the WWF. But how will wrestling remember Frenchy Martin?
Yeah, I think that from like a national standpoint, that's what people remember him. I think that in Quebec that they'll remember him as one of those guys who was a regular, and he was a guy. He went a lot of places, but he was pretty much just a guy. I remember seeing him in I think Texas, and he was a guy. He went to Japan and had some success in Japan with the old IWE, but his biggest success was in Puerto Rico, when Puerto Rico was on fire with Rick Martel's older brother who passed away. Michael Martel, and I think that he was a Martel there, Pierre Martel. They did a brother tag team, and then Rick Martel came in later after Michael Martel passed away. But that was his, he was real big there. I mean, he was, they didn't have the Universal Champion, but the main title was the North American title, which Carlos Colon always held. And he held it a couple of times with, back and forth with Carlos, which is the top spot. He did a 60-minute draw once with Flair down there in a World Championship match. So he was, he was a top heel there, and, top heel in Stampede Wrestling at one point. Journeyman guy. I don't really it's not like there's any great stories that you have, compared to other guys, but, he was a guy who was around for a long time and had the one WWE run, mostly as a manager, and he did the little talk show thing for a little while in French, but that was kind of his deal, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Dave. We've got to wrap this week, but I'd ask you what's going to be in the Observer, but it's TNA Tuesday, and that's going to be a huge story.
TNA Tuesday, yeah, I know. It's so bad because it's I can't even start to write it because whatever I write, I'm going to probably have to rewrite if I would start it now anyway. Yeah.
Well, look forward to that. We'll chat with you about that and about Hell in a Cell next week at the same time.
Okay, have a great week.
You too. Dave Meltzer, WrestlingObserver.com is where you can find that TNA Tuesday story in next week's edition of The Observer. It'll be very, very interesting to see what does surface.